I, a 28-year-old female, am married to my husband, Mark, a 30-year-old male. From the moment we got engaged, I knew his mother, Eleanor, did not like me. She never said it directly to my face. It was always in the small things. A comment about my dress being from a department store, a question about where my parents went on vacation, knowing full well they could not afford to go anywhere. She had a way of making me feel small without ever raising her voice. Mark always asked me to be patient. He would say she just needed time to get used to me. He said she was protective of him. I tried to believe him. I really did. I smiled through every backhanded compliment. I ignored every little jab. I wanted peace. I loved Mark, and his family was part of the deal. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was strong enough to just let it all wash over me. I was wrong. The breaking point came, as it so often does, during the holidays. Christmas dinner was at her house, of course. It was always at her house. The table was set perfectly. The silver was polished. The crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. It was a scene from a magazine, perfect and cold. I had spent a week picking out the perfect gift for her, a first edition copy of her favorite book. I thought maybe this time things would be different. When she opened it, she gave a small, tight smile. She said, "How thoughtful," in a tone that meant it was anything but. She set it aside without a second glance. My heart sank, but I kept the smile plastered on my face. I had to get through the evening. The meal was a blur of polite conversation. I answered questions about my job from Mark's Aunt Carol. I listened to his father, Richard, talk about his golf game. All the while, I could feel Eleanor's eyes on me. It was a heavy, judgmental stare that made my skin crawl. I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about the charity event she was planning. She gave me short, clipped answers, making it clear I was not worthy of a real discussion. I felt like a child at the adults' table, tolerated but not welcome. Mark was seated next to me, but he was deep in conversation with his cousin. He did not seem to notice the tension. Or maybe he just chose not to. That was his way. Avoid conflict at all costs. Later, as I was helping clear the plates, I walked into the kitchen. Eleanor was there with her sister. They did not see me. I paused in the doorway, about to announce my presence when I heard my name. I froze. Eleanor's voice was low, but it cut through the air like a knife. "I just do not understand what he sees in her," she said. "She has no background, no family of any importance. She simply does not belong here." Her sister murmured something in agreement. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. She does not belong here. It was everything I had feared, everything I had felt from her, finally spoken aloud. The cold truth of it stole the air from my lungs. I felt dizzy. I backed away slowly, my hands trembling. I did not want them to know I had heard. I went back to the dining room and sat down. My hands were shaking so badly I had to hide them in my lap. I looked at Mark. He was laughing at something, his cousin said. He looked so happy, so oblivious. A wave of anger washed over me, so strong it almost made me sick. How could he not see it? How could he let her treat me this way? I felt a sudden, desperate need to get out of that house. I stood up and walked over to him. I touched his arm. "Mark, I am not feeling well," I whispered. "I think we need to go home." He looked at me, his smile fading. He saw the look on my face and knew something was wrong. He nodded, concern in his eyes. He made our excuses to the family. Eleanor gave me a look of pure triumph. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally broken me. In that moment, something inside me shifted. It was not just hurt anymore. It was a cold, hard resolve. This was not over. On the car ride home, Mark kept asking me what was wrong. "Did my mom say something to you?" he asked. I could not bring myself to answer. I just stared out the window at the passing Christmas lights. They looked blurry through my unshed tears. If I told him what she said, he would just make excuses for her. He would say I misunderstood. He would promise to talk to her, but he never would. Not really. I knew I was on my own in this. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. I needed to be alone. I needed to think. I heard him pacing in the living room for a while. Then everything went quiet. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over in my head. She does not belong here. The arrogance of it, the cruelty. She had drawn a line in the sand, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that I could no longer stand on his side of it, hoping she would one day let me in. I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Eleanor's smug face. I heard her dismissive tone. I got out of bed and went to the living room. Mark had fallen asleep on the couch. The television was still on, casting a soft glow on his face. He looked so peaceful. For a moment, I felt a pang of love for him, quickly followed by a surge of resentment. His peace came at the cost of mine. I saw his laptop on the coffee table. I often used it to look up recipes or check emails. I sat down and opened it, needing a distraction. I was going to look for a recipe for the leftover turkey, something to occupy my mind. But when the screen lit up, his email was already open. I should have closed it. I know I should have. But a subject line caught my eye. It was from Eleanor. It read, "The Clara problem." My blood ran cold. I could not stop myself. My hand moved the mouse and I clicked on the email. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read. It was worse than anything I could have imagined. Eleanor had written a long, detailed plan. It was a strategy for how to drive me away. She wrote about making me feel isolated from Mark's friends. She suggested creating financial stress to make me feel dependent and desperate. She wrote, "We need to subtly undermine her confidence until she decides to leave on her own. It will be her choice, and Mark will come back to us, where he belongs." It was a declaration of war, a cold, calculated war against me. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the last paragraph. Eleanor wrote, "And if all else fails, we can use the family secret, the truth about his heritage. She is nosy enough that she might find it on her own. And we can frame her for trying to use it as blackmail, or we can threaten to tell Mark she knew all along. Either way, he would never forgive her. It is our final, guaranteed solution." A family secret? What was she talking about? My mind was reeling. I felt like I was going to be sick. It was one thing to be disliked. It was another thing to be the target of a malicious, premeditated plot. Then I saw it. Below her email, there was a draft of a reply from Mark. He had not sent it, but he had written it. It started with, "Mom, I think you are being too harsh." But then it continued. "I know Clara is not what we expected. I know she does not always fit in. Sometimes I worry you're right. Maybe this was a mistake. I just need more time to figure out how to handle this without hurting her too much." He had written those words. My husband, the man who was supposed to love and protect me, he was considering that our marriage was a mistake. He was collaborating with his mother. The pain was so intense it was physical. I felt like I could not breathe. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I stood up and walked to the window, wrapping my arms around myself. The world outside was dark and silent. I had never felt so utterly alone. I did not sleep at all that night. I just sat in the dark, the words from the email burning in my mind. The betrayal was a poison spreading through me. It was not just Eleanor anymore. It was Mark, too. He was weak. He was allowing his mother to control our lives, to plot against his own wife. The next morning, I acted as if nothing was wrong. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. I made coffee. I talked about what to do with the leftovers. Mark seemed relieved that I was no longer upset about the night before. He thought the storm had passed. He had no idea the hurricane was just beginning. I needed a plan. I could not confront them. Not yet. They would deny everything. They would twist my words and make me look like the crazy, paranoid wife. Eleanor had already laid the groundwork for that. I needed proof. I needed to understand what this family secret was. That was her ace in the hole. The thing she was holding over me. I had to find it before she could use it. I started with the finances. Eleanor's email mentioned creating financial stress. I logged into our joint bank account. I scrolled through months of transactions. At first, everything looked normal. Mortgage payments, utility bills, groceries. Then I saw it. A recurring transfer. $500 sent on the first of every month to an account I did not recognize. The description was simple. Family investment. I had asked Mark about our finances before. He always handled the investments. He said he was good at it, and I trusted him. He always said we were saving for a house, for our future. Now, seeing these transfers, a sick feeling grew in the pit of my stomach. I remembered him mentioning a family fund once, something his mother had set up for him and his cousins. He'd been so casual about it. It is just something Mom does, he had said. It is for our future. But now, in the context of that email, it felt sinister. Was this part of her plan? To drain our resources? To make me dependent on him, on her? I decided to test him. That evening, I brought it up casually. Hey, I was looking at our budget today, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I saw those transfers for the family investment. I was thinking maybe we should put that money into our own savings account instead. It would grow faster. Mark immediately got defensive. His face tightened. It is fine where it is, Clara, he said, not looking at me. My mother knows what she is doing. It is better to keep it with the family. I pushed a little harder. But it is our money, Mark. Should not we have control over it? I asked. His voice grew sharp. Why are you questioning this now? It has been this way for years. It is for us, for our future. Just drop it. His reaction told me everything I needed to know. He was hiding something. He was protecting his mother. I felt that familiar sting of betrayal again. It was a constant ache in my chest now. He was choosing her over me, over us. I knew then that I could not rely on him. I had to do this myself. The next day, while he was at work, I started my search for the family secret. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. The truth about his heritage. What could that mean? The family was obsessed with their lineage, their good name. They traced their ancestors back for generations. They were proud of their pure, unbroken line. It was the foundation of Eleanor's whole identity. I started in the attic. It was dusty and filled with old boxes of holiday decorations, old clothes, and forgotten memories. I was not even sure what I was looking for. I just had a feeling that if there was a secret, it would be hidden away up here. I spent hours going through old photo albums. I saw pictures of Mark as a baby, as a little boy. He looked happy. He was always with Eleanor and Richard. They looked like the perfect family. But there was something off about the baby pictures. There were no pictures of a pregnant Eleanor. Not a single one. I thought it was strange, but I told myself it did not mean anything. Maybe she just did not like having her picture taken while pregnant. I kept digging. I found a box tucked away in a dark corner. It had Richard's name on it. It was filled with old letters, report cards, and things from his childhood. I felt a little guilty going through his personal things, but I was desperate. At the bottom of the box, under a stack of yellowed newspapers, I found a large manila envelope. It looked old. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were official-looking documents. I unfolded the first one. My eyes scanned the page, and then I saw the word. It was typed in bold letters at the top of the document. Adoption. I sank to the floor, the papers clutched in my hand. I could not breathe. Mark was adopted. My Mark. The son Eleanor was so fiercely protective of, the one who had to carry on the family name, was not her biological child. I read through the documents. His birth mother's name was listed. I did not recognize it. His birth father was not named. The adoption was finalized when he was just a few days old. Richard and Eleanor were listed as the adoptive parents. It all made sense now. The obsession with bloodlines, the lack of pregnancy photos, Eleanor's constant fear of an outsider, of someone who did not belong. She was a hypocrite. Her entire world was built on a lie. And this was the secret she was going to use against me. I could see it all so clearly now. She would let me find this, or pretend I had found it. Then she would tell Mark I was trying to use it to blackmail the family, or she would tell him I had known all along and kept it from him. Either way, it would destroy his trust in me. It would destroy our marriage. It was a perfect, diabolical plan. A cold fury settled over me. She was not just trying to get rid of me. She was willing to use her own son's life, his identity, as a weapon. She was willing to hurt him deeply, just to get what she wanted. I sat there on the dusty floor of the attic for a long time, the adoption papers in my lap. I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was angry at Eleanor, furious at her cruelty. I was hurt by Mark's weakness, his complicity in my pain. But I also felt a deep sadness for him. He did not know the truth of his own life. He had been raised on a foundation of lies, all to protect his mother's fragile ego and her precious family name. He deserved to know the truth. But I could not be the one to tell him. Not like this. If I told him now, it would look exactly like Eleanor planned. It would look like an attack. I had to be smarter than her. I had to be more patient. I made copies of the adoption papers. I put the originals back in the box, exactly where I found them. No one would know I had been there. I took the copies and hid them in a safe place. They were my insurance policy, my proof. Now I had to figure out what to do next. I could not just sit on this information. It was too big, too explosive. I thought about talking to my friend, Sarah. I needed to tell someone. I called her and asked if I could come over. When I got to Sarah's apartment, I broke down. I told her everything. The comment at Christmas dinner, the email, the secret bank transfers, the adoption papers. She listened patiently, her expression growing more and more horrified. When I finished, she just hugged me. "Clara, this is insane," she said. "This woman is a monster." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "What do I do, Sarah?" I asked. "I feel so trapped." She pulled back and looked me in the eye. "You are not trapped," she said firmly. "You have power now. You have the truth. You just have to decide how and when to use it." We talked for hours. We went over every possibility. Should I confront Mark with the papers? Should I expose Eleanor to the whole family? Sarah was practical. She said, "Think about what you want to happen. What is your end goal?" I thought about it. I did not want to destroy Mark. He was a victim in this too. But I could not live like this anymore. I could not live under Eleanor's thumb, with her constant threats and manipulations. I wanted her power over my husband to be broken. I wanted him to see her for who she truly was. And most of all, I wanted her to stop. I wanted her out of my life, out of my marriage. "My goal is to get her out of our lives," I said finally. "I want Mark to see the truth. I want him to choose me." Sarah nodded. "Okay. Then you cannot make this about you versus his mother. You have to make it about the truth versus her lies. You need an ally within the family." My mind immediately went to Richard, Mark's father. He was always so quiet, so passive. He let Eleanor run the show. But I had seen glimpses of something else in him, a sadness, a weariness. I had a feeling he was not happy. He was just beaten down. Maybe, just maybe, he could be an ally. The next few days were a strange sort of calm before the storm. I went about my life, pretending everything was normal. I was polite to Mark. I answered his questions about my day. But there was a wall between us now, a wall of secrets and betrayal that I could not see past. He seemed to notice the distance. He kept trying to be affectionate, to pull me closer, but I could not respond. Every time he touched me, I thought of that email. I thought of him writing that our marriage might be a mistake. It made my skin crawl. I decided to approach Richard. It was a huge risk. If he was loyal to Eleanor, he would tell her everything, and my plan would be ruined. But my gut told me he was my only chance. I waited for an opportunity. It came a few days later. Eleanor was at one of her charity luncheons. Mark was at work. I knew Richard would be at home, probably in his workshop in the garage. He liked to build things with wood. I drove over to their house. My heart was pounding as I walked up the driveway. I felt like a spy on a dangerous mission. I found him in the workshop, just as I expected. He was sanding a piece of wood. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Clara," he said, "what are you doing here? Is everything all right?" I took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you, Richard," I said. "In private." He looked concerned. He turned off the sander and wiped his hands on a rag. He led me to the small office he had in the back of the house. It was a quiet, comfortable room filled with books. It felt like a safe haven from the rest of the house, from Eleanor's cold perfection. We sat down. I did not know where to begin. I decided to start with a simple, honest question. "Richard, are you happy?" I asked. He looked taken aback. He stared at me for a long moment. I could see a flicker of something in his eyes. A deep, profound sadness. He sighed. A long, weary sound. "That is a complicated question, Clara," he said quietly. "I have a good life, a beautiful home, a son I love." He did not mention Eleanor. I noticed that. "I know Eleanor can be difficult," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I know she does not approve of me." He did not deny it. He just looked down at his hands. "Eleanor is complicated," he said. "She has her own way of seeing the world." I decided to take the plunge. "I think she is hurting our marriage, Richard," I said. "She is trying to drive a wedge between me and Mark." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain I recognized. It was the pain of someone who has been living with Eleanor's manipulations for a very long time. "I have seen it," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I see what she does. I have never known how to stop her." This was it. This was my opening. He was not her loyal soldier. He was another one of her victims. "I think I know how to stop her," I said. "But I need your help. I need to know if you will stand with the truth, even if it is painful." He looked at me, his expression a mixture of fear and hope. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I did not show him the papers. Not yet. It was too soon. I needed to build his trust. "I know she's holding something over us," I said. "A secret. She mentioned it in an email to Mark. She called it the truth about his heritage." Richard's face went pale. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He stood up and started pacing the small room. "She would not," he whispered. "She promised she would never use that." He looked at me, his eyes wide with alarm. "Clara, you have to be careful. You do not know what you are dealing with. She will destroy you to protect herself." "She is already trying to destroy me," I said calmly. "And she is using Mark to do it. He does not even see it. He is so caught up in trying to please her. He is letting her ruin our marriage." "Do you think that is right, Richard? Do you think he deserves to be manipulated like that?" He stopped pacing and looked at me. I could see the conflict in his eyes. Decades of loyalty to his wife, warring with the love for his son. "No," he said, his voice firm. "No, he does not." I knew then that I had him. He was on my side. He was tired of living a lie. We talked for another hour. He did not tell me the secret outright, but he did not have to. His reaction had confirmed everything. He told me about his life with Eleanor, how her need for control had suffocated him over the years, how her obsession with status and appearances had become the entire focus of their lives. He was a man living in a gilded cage. I should have stood up to her years ago, he said, his voice filled with regret. For Mark's sake. For my own. I told him it was not too late. I told him we could fix this. Together. We made a plan. The next family gathering was on New Year's Day. It was just a few days away. That would be the day. That would be the day the truth would finally come out. Leaving his house, I felt a sense of grim determination. I was not just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for Mark, for his right to know who he is. I was fighting for Richard, for his chance to finally be free. And I was fighting for myself, for my right to be treated with respect. Eleanor had started this war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. The days leading up to New Year's were tense. Mark knew something was going on. He kept asking me if I was okay. He said I seemed distant. I just told him I was tired from the holidays. I could not bring myself to confide in him. He had not earned my trust back yet. He had to prove whose side he was really on. I told Mark that I wanted to use the New Year's dinner as an opportunity to clear the air with his mother. I said I wanted to start the new year on a fresh page. He was so relieved. He thought I was finally giving in, that I was going to try to make peace with her. That is a great idea, Clara, he said, smiling for the first time in days. I know she will appreciate that. Things will be better now, you will see. I just nodded. He had no idea what was coming. I felt a small pang of guilt for deceiving him, but it was necessary. He had to be surprised. He had to see his mother's true colors without any warning. New Year's Day arrived. It was a cold, gray day. It felt appropriate. We drove to his parents' house in silence. My heart was a steady drum against my ribs. I was not nervous. I was focused. I had the copies of the adoption papers in my purse. I had Richard as my ally. I was ready. When we walked in, the scene was eerily similar to Christmas. The same perfect table. The same polite smiles. Eleanor greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that felt as cold as ice. Clara, dear, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. So glad you could make it. I'm hoping we can put all that unpleasantness behind us. I smiled back at her. Me too, Eleanor, I said. I think it is time for some honesty. Her smile faltered for just a second. She did not know what to make of that. We sat down for dinner. The conversation was stilted. Everyone seemed to be on edge. I could feel Richard's eyes on me. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a silent signal of support. It gave me strength. I waited until everyone was finished with the main course. There was a lull in the conversation. This was my moment. I took a deep breath. Eleanor, I said, my voice clear and steady. Everyone at the table stopped talking and looked at me. I was hoping we could talk about what happened at Christmas. Eleanor put on a show of confusion. Christmas? What about it, dear? She asked, her voice light and innocent. Mark looked at me, a warning in his eyes. Clara, maybe now is not the time, he said. I ignored him. I kept my eyes locked on Eleanor. I overheard you in the kitchen, I said. You were talking to your sister. You said that I do not belong here. A hush fell over the table. Eleanor's mask of politeness dropped. Her eyes turned to cold, hard stones. I do not recall saying that, she said, her voice sharp. You must have misheard. Oh, I heard you, I said calmly, and I would like to understand why you feel that way. What is it about me that makes me not belong in this family? Eleanor let out a small, condescending laugh. She looked around the table as if to say, Can you believe this girl? She then looked back at me, a smug smile on her face. Well, Clara, it is not personal, she said, her voice patronizing. It is just a matter of breeding. Some families have a certain history, a certain standard. My son was raised to uphold that standard. Mark jumped in. Mom, that is enough, he said, his voice tight. He was embarrassed. He was angry. But he was still protecting her. He was still trying to shut down the conflict instead of facing it. This was the moment of truth. I had to push him off the fence. I turned my attention from Eleanor to my husband. Is that what you believe, Mark? I asked, my voice soft. Do you believe that I am not good enough for you because of my breeding? He looked trapped. Of course not, Clara, he stammered. Yeah, I do not think that. Mom, just apologize. But Eleanor was not going to apologize. She was doubling down. An apology will not change the facts, Mark, she said coolly. Clara is a lovely girl, but she is not one of us. It is as simple as that. I let her words hang in the air for a moment. I let everyone at the table absorb the full weight of her snobbery, her cruelty. Then, I played my final card. I looked directly at Eleanor, but my words were for my husband. You know, Eleanor, you are right about one thing, I said. Family history is very important. Which is why I find it so interesting that you have kept such a big secret about Mark's own history from him his entire life. The change in the room was immediate. The air crackled with tension. Eleanor's smug expression vanished. It was replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. Richard put his fork down and looked at his plate. Aunt Carol looked back and forth between me and Eleanor, her eyes wide with confusion. And Mark just stared at me. What are you talking about, Clara? He asked, his voice shaking slightly. What secret? This was it. The moment from the prompt. I saw the color drain from his face. He looked at his mother. Her face was a mask of stone. He looked at his father, who refused to meet his eyes. The pieces were starting to click into place in his mind. He knew something was terribly wrong. I did not need to say another word. The silence in the room was deafening. He knew. He finally, truly knew that he had been lied to. His whole life was a lie, and the woman responsible was sitting right next to him, her face a perfect portrait of guilt. What is she talking about, Mom? Mark asked, his voice low and dangerous. Eleanor did not answer. She just stared at me with pure hatred in her eyes. She is lying, Eleanor finally choked out. She is making things up to cause trouble. She is trying to tear this family apart. I just shook my head slowly. I am not the one who has been lying, Eleanor, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. I slid it across the table to my husband. You deserve to know the truth, Mark, I said softly. He looked at the envelope as if it were a snake. His hands trembled as he reached for it. He opened it and pulled out the papers. He read the first page. I watched his face as the words sank in. I saw the confusion turn to disbelief, and the disbelief turned to a deep, gut-wrenching pain. He looked up from the papers, his eyes filled with tears. He looked at his mother. You adopted me, he whispered. The words were so quiet, but they echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. My whole life. It has all been a lie? Eleanor started to cry, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of anger, of a cornered animal. We did it to protect you, she cried. Your birth mother. She was no one. She was a disgrace. We gave you a better life. We gave you our name. Mark just stared at her, his expression hardening. You gave me your name? He said, his voice filled with a cold fury I had never heard from him before. This name that you are so proud of, this name that you use to look down on my wife, it is not even my name. That was when Richard finally spoke. He looked at his son, his face etched with years of regret. She was not a disgrace, Mark, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Your birth mother was a good woman. I knew her. She loved you very much, but she was young, and she was alone. I let Eleanor convince me that this was the best way. I have regretted it every day of my life. The confession hung in the air. The perfect family was shattered. The lies that had held it together for 30 years had finally crumbled to dust. Mark stood up. He threw the papers on the table in front of his mother. How could you? He said, his voice breaking. How could you lie to me my whole life? And how could you use that lie to hurt my wife, the one person who has been honest with me? He looked at me then, and in his eyes, I saw everything I had been hoping for. I saw love and I saw regret. He finally understood. He finally saw his mother for the manipulative, cruel person she was. He walked around the table to me and took my hand. "Let us go, Clara," he said. He did not look back at his mother. We walked out of the house, leaving the ruins of her perfect life scattered on the dining room table. The car ride home was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than the one on Christmas night. It was not a silence of anger and distance. It was a silence of shock and grief. Mark held my hand the whole way. When we got home, he finally broke down. He sat on the couch and just sobbed. I sat next to him and held him. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say. He just needed to let it all out. After a long time, he finally looked at me. "I am so sorry, Clara," he said, his voice raw. "I am so sorry I did not see it. I was so blind. I let her hurt you. I defended her. Can you ever forgive me?" "I already have," I said, and I meant it. Seeing him finally stand up to her, finally choose me, had healed a part of me that I thought was broken forever. We talked for hours that night. He asked me everything. How I found out. How long I had known. I told him the whole story, from the email to my conversation with his father. He listened without interrupting. When I was finished, he just shook his head in disbelief. "I cannot believe she was planning to blackmail you with my own life story," he said. "She is sick." The next few days were a blur. The fallout was swift and brutal. Mark called his father. They had a long, emotional conversation. Richard apologized for his weakness, for his years of silence. He said he was proud of Mark. He also said that he had finally stood up to Eleanor. He had told her that he was done living her lie. He was moving out. The news was shocking, but not surprising. Richard had been a prisoner for a long time. I had just given him the key to his cage. Mark also called his Aunt Carol. She had been at the dinner. She had seen everything. She told Mark that she had always known Eleanor was difficult, but she had never imagined she was capable of such cruelty. She said the entire family was talking about it. Eleanor's perfect reputation was in tatters. She had built her entire identity on being the matriarch of a proud, old family. Now, everyone knew that her foundation was a lie. She had lost the one thing she valued more than anything else: her status. Eleanor tried to contact Mark. She called him dozens of times. She sent him long, rambling text messages. Some were filled with apologies. Others were filled with accusations, blaming me for everything. She said I had poisoned him against her. He did not reply to any of them. He blocked her number. He told me he needed space. He needed time to process everything. He said he could not have a person like that in his life, even if she was the woman who raised him. A few weeks later, Mark and I were having dinner when his father called. Richard had found an apartment of his own. He sounded happier, lighter than I had ever heard him. He asked if he could meet with Mark. He had something for him. They met the next day. When Mark came home, he was holding an old, worn photograph. It was a picture of a young woman with a kind smile. She was holding a newborn baby. "It is her," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. "My birth mother." Richard had kept the photo all these years, hidden from Eleanor. He had also given Mark a name and a last known address. He said he would help Mark look for her if that was what he wanted. Mark looked at me, his eyes shining with a mixture of hope and fear. "What do you think?" he asked. "Should I try to find her?" I smiled and took his hand. "I think you should do whatever feels right to you," I said, "and I will be right here with you no matter what." We started the search together. It was a slow, difficult process. But it was something we were doing together. It was healing us. It was building a new foundation for our marriage, one based on honesty and trust, not on secrets and lies. We were a team. We were a family, the real kind, the kind you choose, the kind you fight for. A few months passed. We did not hear anything from Eleanor. I heard through Aunt Carol that she had become a recluse. She did not go to her charity events anymore. She did not see her friends. She had lost her social standing, and without it, she had nothing. She had tried to make me feel like an outsider, like I did not belong. But in the end, she was the one who was cast out. She was the one who was left all alone. One evening, we got a call. It was a woman from an adoption search agency we had contacted. She had found something. She had found Mark's birth mother. Her name was Elizabeth, and she lived just a few states away. She had always hoped that one day her son would look for her. She had never married. She had never had any other children. She had been waiting for him. The day Mark met his birth mother was one of the most emotional days of my life. I waited in the car while he went into her house. He was in there for over 2 hours. When he came out, he was not crying. He was smiling. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. He looked whole. He looked free. He told me that she was wonderful. She was kind and warm. She told him all about her life, and he told her about his. It was the beginning of a new chapter for him. We started visiting Elizabeth regularly. She welcomed me into her life with open arms. She was the mother I'd always dreamed of having. She was kind, supportive. And she loved Mark unconditionally. She thought I was wonderful. She told me, "Any woman who could stand up to a bully like Eleanor is a hero in my book." For the first time, I truly felt like I belonged. Mark and I are stronger than ever now. The lies that were meant to tear us apart ended up bringing us closer. He is a different man. He is more confident, more sure of himself. He no longer seeks the approval of others. He knows who he is and where he comes from. And he knows that his real family are the people who love him for who he is, not for the name he carries. As for Eleanor, I do not know what happened to her, and I do not care. She tried to ruin my life. She tried to take my husband from me, but all she managed to do was destroy herself. She wanted to make me feel small and powerless. She wanted to prove that I did not belong, but she was the one who ended up with no family, no status, and no power. She finally learned what it feels like to be on the outside, looking in. And I learned that belonging is not about your name or your history. It is about love and truth and having the courage to fight for both